Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners. This is your host, Andy Curry. Welcome to the show today. I have a very interesting guest for you. Yes, his name is John Register. He has been speaking professionally for 18 years. The content he speaks on is near and dear to my heart, and it is on handling adversity. I can't wait to hear about that. John speaks primarily in the U.S., although he has spoken internationally. He is from my hometown, Colorado Springs, Colorado, and he has co-authored a book. So, John, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you so much. Sure glad to be on today.
We're glad to have you with us, John. Tell us about your speaking business. Who is it that you're talking to? What is it that you're helping them with? What are you teaching them?
Sure. To kind of back into that, my topic is hurdling adversity. And so it comes from a life experience of being the eighth fastest hurdler in the country. And I had a crippling injury in Hays, Kansas, which resulted in the amputation of my left leg. And 18 months later, I wound up making the Paralympic swim team that competed in Atlanta, Georgia. And then from there, I went on to return to track and field and won the silver medal in the long jump over in Sydney, Australia. So the topic, hurdling adversity, really helps businesses through a process of identifying that everyone goes through a hard choice in life. And then from there, what are the steps we can take to actually create our new normal? What are the steps we can create that actually gets us moving forward in our lives, in our businesses, in our communities, instead of settling into our setbacks? And so the difference between like a lot of other more inspirational speakers that I have versus them is, number one, the life experience of going through the trauma and having to wrestle with my identity of who I was at a particular point in time. Just like many businesses and organizations, when they're struggling with one type of choice or another, they're wrestling with, how do I move forward? Do I lose this, or have the workforce go down a little bit and reduce my workforce in order to, trim the fat for moving forward? And a lot of those things they're tough decisions, but we have to, press through it. And can we make the right choice? And the right choice generally sometimes is the harder choice between the two, because we can either coast or we can press forward. So that's how I help businesses, and it's been going on for, like you said, the 17, 18 years now, and I've really got it kind of dialed in where I think the businesses always come back and say, we never thought about it in these terms of how the power of inspiration really helps us to drive some of our key indicators of what we need to do to enhance our business models.
Now, I'm guessing that the listeners are going to want to know how you lost your leg, first of all. And you said it was an accident, or what was it?
It was an accident. So I was running track and field. I was, like I said, the eighth fastest hurdler in the country at the time. I had a USA Track and Field had touted me to be on the Olympic team in 1996. So I kept up, moving forward with my hurdles. And I was also a soldier in the United States Army at the time. I'm on the Army's World-Class Athlete Program. So I'd come back from Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the Gulf War without a scratch. And as I was training for my third Olympic trials, in my third event, I qualified in the 110 high hurdles in another event, and then I qualified in the long jump in another Olympic trials. And this was my third shot. It was coming probably my last shot to make the Olympic team. And as I went across the hurdle, I landed wrong, hyperextended my left knee, severed the artery behind the kneecap, and 5 days later, I had to make a tough choice. As Dr. Randy Mullins came into the room with my wife holding on to my left hand in one hand, and my mom holding on to my right hand, my dad having his hand on my shoulder, he said, you can keep your limb, but you're going to have to use a walker or a wheelchair for the rest of your life. Or you can face an amputation and use a prosthetic for the rest of your life. And, what kind of choice is that between, not walking and not really walking. And I think, what resonates with businesses is sometimes they have those hard choices as well. You can't go back the other way. I mean, my Olympic dream, that's over with.
Right.
Going back the opposite way and being the 8th fastest hurdler, that's done. So how do we move forward from those tough choices? And once we make that choice, I guess it was 3 months later, I had to make I got my new prosthetic and I'm on it, and I think it's going to be an easy first step. We got to make the first step. And as I was in the parallel bars trying to make that first step, I wobbled. The knee buckled underneath me as I took the first step on my new prosthetic. And I had to catch myself on those parallel bars. And I've been walking for 29 years when that happened. I was 29 years old when it happened. So when I'm taking my first step, I'm thinking it's going to be pretty similar to walking on my other limb that is now amputated. But that's not the case. The first step is hard. The first step is always shaky. And even though we choose to go on that diet, the first day is always the toughest day, right?
Right.
Or the first time we lay off those employees and we're coming back the next day, it's always a tough day when that cubicle is empty. And did I make the right decision? Goes on in our minds. But what I resolved myself to do after making that first step and wobbling between those parallel bars was I resolved in myself to take 15 steps correctly every single day so that I could get back up to a healthy and active lifestyle. That was my resolve. And once we make those hard decisions and we take that first step, we wobble the first time, and we're looking in retreat, we want to go backwards, we can't go back. We have to resolve within ourselves to take those 15 steps a day. What are the goals that we're setting before us? How can we measure them? How can we measure them each and every day, within inside of those steps that we're taking, whatever the proverbial steps in our lives, to ensure that we are making progress towards the goals that we said that we wanted to have. And that's a deliverable I have for the client. And putting it in the aspect, because what happens with me in the scaling of the business, of being others like me now around the country to do these inspirational talks, I call it inspirational leadership talks, is that the difference is you can have somebody in the room ahead of you saying it and getting a story that comes from someone else's life, or you can have the testimonial right in the room, right in front of you, so that there is no wiggle room for your employees or your leadership team or your CEO group that you are in a mastermind with. They can't deny the authenticity that's right in front of them. And that puts them in the state of, if you can do this, what can I do? And it's the same thing with me. I look at other individuals as well in the business community and have mentors around me that challenge me to say, if they can do it and they're telling me where they've come from, I can do it too. And so we're able to have that authenticity. I just I'm missing a limb, and people associate that with the limb was the biggest thing I had to overcome, when that's really not the case. The biggest thing I had to overcome was the stigma that other people placed on me versus what they thought I could or could not do based upon what they thought they could do if they were in my situation. And that's what we fight against all the time. We always fight against that.
That's a powerful message. Yeah, we're always fighting against that. And, when you see the differences of people who, it's really in the head, isn't it?
It is. It's and the head sometimes it locks on to the people that are around us. And so if I had a negative doctor that told me I would never walk again, would never run again, all those type of things, your life is over basically, I might have believed that because I don't know any better what to believe. I hadn't seen an amputee before. I didn't know about prosthetics. If I had a wife that was telling me that she was going to leave me and you're 3/4 of a man now, and she was going to walk out the door, I might have had a different experience. If I had a son that didn't come up to me and said, Daddy, are you okay? And validate me as his father, I may have had a different experience. But we have to surround ourselves with those individuals. I call them the Fab Five. Remember the Michigan team, Chris Webber and all those folks, those basketball players that they couldn't win the big one, but they were so dominant. The best recruiting class ever was said to be in basketball. Mm-hmm. We have to surround ourselves with the talent that are the fierce friends who will not allow us to fail.
Yeah, that's powerful. Now, I would imagine, I would love to hear your talk. I can imagine, probably the hundreds of thousands of people you've probably spoken to. When you look back on groups you've spoken to, what event jumps out at you where you walked away knowing, wow, it really made a difference for somebody? Because I'll bet you've made a lot of difference for people. What jumps out at you?
I'd like to, Andy, I'd like to change that question a little bit, because I think every group that I learned something from, and I like to look at what it is I can lean from this to make myself better. And I'll share a quick story about one of my first really major speeches. I was really hot to go down here. I thought it was all big stuff and everything, and I get my first really kind of big, like the biggest check back then, for me. I was like, wow, this is going to be great. And I went to speak to this group of high performers. I mean, really high performers in the pharmaceutical industry. Mm-hmm. And it was a closed room, about 16 people around a table, and I thought I was going to slay it. And I walked out of that room, thinking I didn't connect with anybody in there. It was horrible. And for the next 10 years, I said I will never do a speech like that again. I will always be rock solid prepared, because I thought, I missed it. I didn't do my homework or something. And 10 years later, the lady that hired me switched companies, went to another pharmaceutical industry, and she found my contact information. My contact information had changed. She found my contact information and sought me out, and she said, could you come here and do that same thing you did for my leadership team back in Orlando, Florida, for my new team? When I first got to talk to her, I thought she wanted her money back, right?
Yeah.
But she had, because I thought for 10 years, I always thought it was the worst thing I've ever done. And we have to understand and realize that we don't know who we're impacting and how we're impacting them. And so when I got the courage up to ask her, for 10 years, I thought I blew it. I didn't connect with your group. And she said, no, it was so deep. My team was thinking and really sifting through for the next 2 days. They were discussing and having fiery conversations about what you were saying. And so I took that to mean that I have to let my audience process the information I'm giving them. And that was a huge growth moment. And we can learn where our blind spots are by asking questions of other people. So my process of going through, to go back to your question about what the best speech is, it's always the next one. Because the process I have now for allowing companies to grow, because let's be honest, when I go into an organization, I don't know the organization as well as they know their organization. I might have memorized some of their vision statements and value statements and some of those things, but for the most part, I don't know the internal workings. What my job is as a speaker, as a facilitator, is to draw that out from them so that they can have successful wins and they can be able to implement some of the action steps that I'm going to give them. And how I do that is I have a process of how I go through it. I heard a great process of a story, a point, and application. So that's a 3-step process that I heard about. Then I morphed it and made it my own. So I do a story, a point, an application. The point is my point. The application is how I'm going to apply it to the audience. And then I'm going to do an activity with the audience. And either it's a talk to yourself or it's a more formalized activity that we're going to get a summary statement out from the audience. And that summary statement is going to be exactly how they're going to apply these points into their everyday life in that company. And it's a brilliant strategy. And, you guys can take it and run with it, because we want to get the value to the organization that we're speaking to. And I take that summary back into my main point to summarize the whole thing. And that process then is now we have actionable steps. And we have accountability measures that are now built in by not for me, but by what they said. And that gets them further on down the line. And I think that's what really helps the each and every audience to come back, years later and say, can you come back and do a similar thing because we're having this struggle? Or it may not be a struggle. It may be when I do the Citius, Altius, Fortius speech, which is swifter, higher, stronger, from the Olympic motto of that we have, the Latin words, and we can be great today and greater tomorrow. So I don't care if you're a top level performer, gold, silver, or bronze medalist in your field, you have to be able to outdistance the competition. Because remember, at one time, Kodak was on top of the world.
Right.
And how many times do we now go back into a Walmart or another store and use the Kodak machine to develop our pictures?
Mm-hmm.
We don't. We use our phones now.
Right.
But they couldn't adjust to the time shift or the technology shift. And they had the technology to do it, they just didn't do it. And I don't know why they didn't do it, but they didn't. So it's like Bell, right? All these companies that didn't adjust to the times. So we want to make sure we're on the technology edge, on the cutting edge for our organizations that we're with, and then we can be a great performing organization. But part of my message is if we are not, my model is what I share with people is inspiration is the catalyst to motivation. A lot of times you get a motivational speaker in there. That's why I don't put myself in that category, because motivational speakers are great, and I love what they do. But I believe in my model, I'm missing a piece. Before the motivation can actually come, you have to have something that inspires that, something that is a catalyst, something that fuels the motivation. So what is it that you saw, did, or were a part of that just wanted you to act? So inspiration is a catalyst to motivation. Motivation in turn causes actions. Actions then lead to results, and results re-inspire us or allow others that are watching the process to catch the vision. And the way it works in the business is if we are not inspiring our workforce, the CEO, if they cannot articulate the vision when I walk in the door and I say, "What's your vision?" and they can't say it, I don't care if you are a Fortune 100 company, you still have room to grow. You still have some ways that you can get tighter in your organization. Those are the things that are valuable to organizations after I leave them, and then we have follow-up discussions later on.
Interesting. Now you are going to go speak in Korea before long, correct?
Yes, a long way to go before Korea.
No kidding.
Thanks for mentioning that. I have Tacoma, Washington on Sunday. I'm doing Walmart in Columbus, Ohio on Tuesday, and then I have a TEDx actually coming up 26th of September in TEDx Arena Circle at the Budweiser Event Center here in I think it's Loveland, Colorado. I think that's where it's at. And then yes, Korea, we have a sports symposium that's going on over there. I was invited to come and share my story as well as be a part of a panel discussion on disability and sport, which is a really interesting topic that's near and dear to my heart, of injured military veterans. I built a program with the United States Olympic Committee on that, as well as our youth population in this country that have disabilities, physical disabilities, unlike Special Olympics, which are cognitive disabilities, and this population base that often gets lost in the shuffle because we don't service them in the K through 12 area. So that's another area that I work with the National Federation of High Schools on to grow that population base.
Well, that's fantastic, John. How can people get a hold of you should they want to hear you speak or know more?
Love that question. Yeah, that's real easy. My website is johnregister.com, and on that website has a lot of links to the social media platforms I'm on. One that is not on there right now that I want to put on there is Periscope. Periscope is bought out by Twitter, and it is live TV, and I'm on every morning, Monday through Friday. I do an Inspire Scope. So it's just inspirational leadership of what I've heard probably the previous week, and I want to share with the audience. And I just give away tips and tricks on how to do it. I just kind of give it away. So if you want some really good information, and there's some really wonderful people that come on and share things on the feed that comes up, you can follow me on that on Periscope. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. JohnRegister.com is the website, and that's the best launching place for it.
Okay, well, John, thank you so much for joining us. That was great information. I can tell you're passionate about your topic, as well you should be, and I'd love to hear you sometime. But thank you for joining us.
I'm honored. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.